A Guten Erev Shabbos. This Shabbos is a very special Shabbos. It is Shushan Purim, the Purim for cities that have been surrounded by walls since olden times, like Jerusalem, like Shushan. Some other cities like Tzfat celebrate both. Not too many Jews in Shushan these days, so it seems that Jerusalem is the only place where the 15th of Adar, Shabbat, is the main Purim. Very interesting to see how they spread all the mitzvot of Purim, Megillah, gifts to the needy, Mishalach Manos al Hanisim, over 3 days. It's actually called Purim Mishulash, the threefold Purim. We'll mark Shushan Purim by leaving out the Av Harachamim prayer before Musaf. Not such a big celebration, but we do our best. So, happy Shushan Purim in advance. The theme of this week's Torah reading is rupture and repair and restoration. There's a very embarrassing event recounted in our portion this week, Tissa, the sin of the golden calf incident, which threatens to do harm to the relationship between the Jewish people and God. Fortunately, we get help for our problem. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our great teacher, whom we thought had left us, reappears on the scene to broker forgiveness for the people. He approaches God in contrition, and the fact of the matter is, by the end of the Parsha, we have a stronger and more solid connection with God on more tracks and in more ways than we had before. We also know that our relationship can survive trauma and mistakes and even infidelity and build back stronger. That's good to know. Other years we've talked about this great rupture and repair and what it means for our relationships in our times, so let's leave that idea on pause for now. This year is quite out of the ordinary because we have 5 Shabbatot between Purim and Pesach. Purim is on Friday and Pesach starts on a Saturday night. So in those 4 weeks, we just managed to edge in 5 Shabbosim. In addition to this Shabbos, we will take 2 more weeks to complete the portions of Vayakel and then Pekudei and say Chazak on the whole book of Exodus. Then Vayikra, the beginning of the book of Leviticus, and Tzav, the portion of Tzav, will be Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbos before Pesach. However, that Shabbos will also be Erev Pesach, Erev Yom Tov. So really, too late to get started about talking about preparations for Pesach. By then, we'll have to be all prepared. So we're going to move things around a little bit. The Shabbat Hagadol Drasha will be the week before Shabbos Hagadol. In other words, Parshas Vayikra, 3 weeks from now, April 4th and 5th. We'll also have a nice Friday night dinner that Shabbos, so please do sign up and join your KST friends for a nice leisurely chametz dinner before we have to turn the social hall over to Pesach Dik. I think there is still time to get in to the early bird pricing, depending on when you are listening to this. The Shabbat Hagadol davening will be a little early in the morning, so we can still have kiddush and eat bread before the time to stop eating chametz occurs. That's coming up in a month's time, and you'll see the notices in the Nachas and other places beforehand. So since we have more time to go, we'll save getting into the Haggadah and the liberation mindset for another week. And to speak about politics in any country you'd want to talk about, that will definitely ruin the mood of our Shabbat, so let's not go there. Really too crazy. Our portion this week, our Parsha of Tissa, has 9 mitzvot in it. The first one, giving a half shekel in the month of Adar, we recalled on Thursday, Tainus Esther, by donating a half a silver dollar. If those first 5 verses that we read in the beginning of the portion sound familiar, that's because we just read them 2 weeks ago on Rosh Chodesh Adar. The Parsha also says to wash your hands and feet before serving in the temple, looking at you, Kohanim. So you notice we have a hand-washing cup set up right at the entrance to the shul for people who want to wash hands before davening. For those who would like to wash feet, we're not quite set up for that, so sorry. Parsha Kisisa tells us to keep the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year in Israel, which Israel does, and that affects our Israeli produce here in Toronto and our support of observant farmers in Israel. The end of the Sedra cautions us not to eat meat and milk which have been cooked together. That may also sound familiar. We did hear that a few weeks ago too. The Gemara explains that the Torah prohibits mentions this specific mitzvah 3 times. Once to prohibit doing the cooking, another time to prohibit the eating, consuming of milk and meat together, and once to prohibit us even from having any benefit from such a mixture. And the portion also talks about Shabbat. It has a lengthy passage in the long second Aliyah where God speaks to Moshe and says, "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, but keep my Shabbat. It is a sign between me and you." A familiar passage is from here that forms part of the Friday night davening and the Shabbat morning Kiddush. It says in this week's portion, "V'shamru v'nei Yisrael es ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'dorasam berit olam." The children of Israel shall keep the Shabbat to make Shabbos through their generations as an everlasting covenant. Beini uvein v'nei Yisrael oshi le'olam. It's an eternal sign between me, says God, and the children of Israel. Ki sheishes yamim asa Hashem es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. That in 6 days God created heaven and earth, and on the 7th day He rested. Uvayom hashvi'i shavas v'yi nafash. If we want to be holy, godlike, we should follow in God's ways. We're not going to have much success creating a world. Not in 6 days, not in any days. But resting, that's where we can succeed. To do just like God did. Rest on that 7th day. Rest, meaning hold off from productive, constructive labor, which is suggested to us by the instruction in our Torah reading this Shabbat to rest, coming right between the 4 parshas that detail constructing, building the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Whatever work that involved, we avoid on Shabbat. With rest, we can really accomplish something, even though rest seems like nothing. In this case, nothing really is something. As people get stressed ever more these days from so many things to do, so many things to buy, so much media to follow and digest, more information than we can possibly be expected to absorb and still keep our wits about us, how sensible, how worthwhile, how holy and restorative a day off from news and media and obligations and shopping can be. A day of true freedom when so much else seems to keep us in its grip. In the passages we read, there are some things that catch our attention. The mitzvah of keeping Shabbos is referred to twice here. First, God speaks about my Shabbos. Then it just says Shabbat. Then it says that Shabbos is a sign, an oath, and then it says it's a brit, it's a covenant. And it gives 2 reasons for observing Shabbos. First, because God makes us holy with Shabbat, and then it says it's to remind us that God created heaven and earth in 6 days and then rested on the 7th day. In trying to sort all this out, Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin refers to an interesting Gemara in Tractate Shabbat, which some of us learned just the other week. Let's say a person is traveling alone outside of the Jewish community and somehow gets mixed up and forgets which day they're supposed to stop and rest for Shabbat. What are they supposed to do? Nowadays, of course, we're never far from some point of information. The Apple Watch on your wrist is telling you everything you want to know, while it's sending information we probably don't want anybody to know back to data central headquarters. The front page of the newspaper tells you what day it is. Remember, the banks used to have the time, date, temperature as you drove by. If you're waiting for your flight in an airport, there's that annoying TV screen telling you exactly what day and time it is with all kinds of different things happening there. It's hard not to know nowadays, but you can imagine a time when knowing exactly what day of the week it was a little bit harder. And a person traveling alone might actually lose count. So the Talmud gives a suggestion on what to do. Actually, 2 suggestions, which become part of an interesting discussion. Rav Huna says that as soon as we figure out we've lost count, we should start counting the week right then and there. Count 6 days, and on the 7th day, stop, rest, and keep Shabbat. Reb Chia bar Rav argues. He says that immediately upon realizing that we don't know, we should keep Shabbos right then and there and count the next day as Yom Rishon, Sunday, and proceed to count from there. The Gemara explains their rationale, both of them. Rav Huna's view goes like the original 6 days of creation, 6 days and then Shabbos. Rav Chia goes like the creation of man, created Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat. First experience he had after his ill-fated snack was Shabbos. After that, a week of work. These two views of what Shabbos is really about and what a person who isn't sure should really do brings two perspectives together, our point of view and the Creator's. Human beings, created right before Shabbat, had no prior merit, no experience, no time even to prepare ourselves to enter into Shabbat. Adam's very being, almost from the start, was filled with the wondrous brilliance of Shabbos. As soon as it was over, though, Adam found himself in a new experience, the 6-day work week. Now that he had experienced the blessings of Shabbos, now he had to work for them if he wanted to experience them again. So with us, as we bless God when we usher in Shabbos, God also blesses us with holiness, the specialness, the inspiration and spiritual strength, not only to survive, but also to thrive in the coming 6 days of work. This is God's Shabbos. Then the 6 days which we engage the world, we take that peace and tranquility and purpose and higher perspective from the last Shabbat that we experienced, and we pay it forward. That's our Shabbat. That's the la'asot, the one we get to make, to partner with God in creating. That's why we say both nighttime and daytime. We mentioned this mitzvah of keeping Shabbat. We say it twice. Once it's called God's Shabbat, and once it's not. Once it says it's a sign, once it says it's a covenant. And then one rationale about God sanctifying us, and then later we say about God remembering the creation and resting cycle. A sign, an ot, or an ois, is something that separates one thing from others. Tefillin is also called a sign, which is why tefillin are not worn on Shabbos. You don't need two signs, Shabbat and tefillin. A covenant elevates us even beyond mere distinction and separation. For example, a bris is done before a baby boy even has the realization that he's accepting it, or he can run away if he doesn't accept it. It's beyond intellect. It's higher than logic. It's a commitment, and it's not entirely of our own doing. It takes two to make a covenant. A sign requires one party to commit. A covenant takes two parties, both parties, to embrace one another, like Shabbat, like a married couple, like God and the Jewish people. The rescue and the respite that Shabbos offers us in our time comes from both, from our making Shabbat, not just on Friday night and Saturday itself, but in looking forward to and organizing our lives so we can really take a step back from the world, particularly the digital world's hold on us, to experience a little bit of real freedom, certainly to finish our sentences, look each other in the eye, without the distraction of all the beeps and chirps and alerts and signals competing for our attention. That itself is a gift. And even more so, to feel our true selves as we are and as we would like to be, free, joyous, and deeply connected to the true source of life. Shabbat Shalom.